Welcome to our live training module. We're going to be taking a look in this tutorial, getting our engine to fire up and run on our Emtron system. We have to work through the idle control, fuel and spark timing tuning in idle conditions, setting up our closed loop feedback within the idle conditions. That's going to be for our fueling. We're going to be checking our timing with a timing light, verifying the trigger offset is matched between our engine and the Emtron. So if we're commanding a certain amount of timing, we're going to be receiving that at the engine. And then we're finally going to be taking a look at setting up our VVT inlet position, making sure that that's zeroed out as well. We have a lot of things to discuss. The first thing we need to do here is upload our base file we've built in our last tutorial, our last two tutorials, to the Emtron in this tutorial. Now, before I started to film, I've done a firmware update. Anytime you're going through a new software set, you need to do a firmware update, and that process takes about a half hour. I did not film it. It's straightforward to do the firmware updating process. I did cover that in the main training course. You just go up here to update firmware and follow the prompts and be consistent. Don't shut off the power to the Emtron. I actually had an issue where the battery started to run a little bit low. I had to put it on a battery charger. It required me to restart, took another 10 minutes. So the process took on all about 40 minutes to complete the firmware update. So that's been done already. We don't need to bore ourselves with those details. What we need to do now is upload that file after the firmware update's been done. So what I'll do here is go to send cal to ECU, and then it's gonna allow me to select our base cal that we've created in that last tutorial. You can see once the file's been sent, a store will be performed automatically. We'll click OK, allow that to upload the file to the Emtron, and once that's complete, we're gonna jump in here and just double check a few things. We need to go through the very basics, making sure that the sensor data has been configured correctly. So things like our map pressure sensor, engine coolant temp, air temperature, on and on, are dialed in so that we have that calibration curve correct, so that the compensation tables and charge temperature is going to be calculated properly from the Emtron, and everything is going to work as we're intending. So we want to make sure that sensor data is right. We've wired in a fuel pressure sensor, lambda sensor, as well as a flex fuel sensor. We want to verify that those are reading right. Whole bunch of things to check here in the beginning of the tutorial. We'll also be checking and testing our outputs from our Emtron, verifying that some of the basic functionality control is working, so that, again, when we fire up the engine, things like the fuel pump are going to be priming the fuel system and giving us fuel pressure. The cooling fan's going to turn on. We don't want any surprises before we fire off the engine. So let's go and do our basic sensor check, inputs and outputs. So we can see here the file's been sent successfully to the Emtron. We're going to go to OpenECU and establish a communication here between the Emtron. So I am sitting in the vehicle and I do have the ignition key powered on. The Emtron's powered on. Lower left-hand corner, previously in that main screen, we saw that it was ECU detected. So it recognized the Ethernet port, and it knows everything is in line with that connection. So we've established that. Everything is good there. So now that we are online with the Emtron and the file's been uploaded, we want to verify anytime we're going and doing a firmware update and we're uploading the file. We want to just go through, make sure that all the programming is correct and there's no oddities. We're going to do that in just a second, but let's go and just check our basic runtime values. And this is for our inputs, such as our map pressure sensor, throttle position sensor, engine coolant temp, air temp, on and on. What we can do here is we can do this in two different ways. We can go up here into this main dash screen, and we can see some of our sensor data in here. So we can take a look. Engine speed showing 0 RPM. We're not cranking or running the engine, so it should show 0. Manifold pressure showing 99.5 kPa. Now we always want to see that the manifold pressure is matching what our barrel pressure sensor is registering and reading, and that's on board to the Emtron. Now these two match, but if you're finding there's a discrepancy there, you want to go ahead and do a calibrate option with your map sensor. We can actually go here to configure, jump in here to the engine section under manifold pressure, and go here to the calibrate button. And what this does is compares the barrel pressure sensor reading, the onboard barrel pressure, to the map sensor, and then it'll go ahead and automatically update the map sensor to read what the barrel pressure sensor reads. So we'll click OK and apply OK, and we can see that that hasn't changed because it looks like it was in order there. Let's go back here to tuning, and we'll just stay on this dash here real quick. So barrel pressure, that's going to be reading whatever the onboard barrel pressure is reading, so that looks good. I am at sea level, so that's pretty much close to sea level. 100 kPa, approximately sea level. Engine temperature, 25.3 Celsius, so that's coming from our OEM Honda coolant temp sensor. Air temperature is our Delphi sensor, it's 27.8. Now the charge temperature, I actually went in before I started to film and zeroed out the charge temp table. I also, just real quickly here, zeroed out the compensation table. So let's just talk about that real quick. So if we're looking in here to the charge temp estimate table, A value of 0 reads and registers all of the air temp sensor for the air density within our VE model. Normally, if you have the air temp sensor mounted in this position where it's going to get heat soak, that's a concern. It can start to skew up what the air temperature is going to be, which can skew up then the charge temperature estimation, and then that'll cause the Emtron to pull fuel out prematurely. Now, because I have the open end air temp sensor, the GM air temp sensor, and I have it mounted in a position where it's going to get fresh airflow, I don't have any concerns of getting heat soak, so I want to register all of whatever that sensor is going to be showing us in terms of the air temperature and use that for charge temperature. So I just zeroed this table out, and then I also went in here to this offset table and I zeroed this out as well. It had some values populated in that base map that we started off with that was skewing up would skew up the charge temp registration. So I did make those changes before we started to film, and that we can see here that inlet air temp is showing 27.8 Celsius, charge temperature showing 27.8 Celsius. It's matching, and that's because with a value of 0 in the charge temp estimate table, that'll register and read whatever the inlet air temp is showing. So if you have a air temp sensor that's questionable, it's getting a lot of heat soak, you'll have to use that charge temp estimate table. Kind of keep that in mind. But I've zeroed all these out. Let's just jump back in here. Let's just jump back to the main VE table. Taking a look here, we're also seeing our battery voltage, 12.5 volts. I have it on the battery charger right now. Battery was a little bit weak, and we want to see at least 11.8 to 12 volts. Healthy battery. You don't want to go and try to crank it over if the battery's too low. Now, one thing we haven't taken a look at here is our throttle position sensor. We need to calibrate this. This is really important because, as we can see here, we're using an efficiency calculation is based on throttle position, is actually throttle position over barrel pressure. So that's going to be incorporating the barrel pressure right.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.